Hello, I'm Ann Price. Thank you for joining the Octavia Flynn Public Library for our Authors Festival. This year, our theme is visual storytelling. Our next guest, Bob Rosebrough, a local attorney who has been practicing law in New Mexico for over 30 years and recently completed 2 terms as mayor of Gallup. Today, Bob will be presenting A Place of Thin Veil, Life and Death in Gallup, New Mexico. As an outsider who became an insider, Bob shares some of Gallup's iconic stories and some of its long-hidden secrets. Without further ado, here is Bob Rosebrough.
About 15 years ago, I was having lunch with a friend at the El Metate restaurant in Chihuahua, and my friend was Don Steele. And Don was an elderly minister who came to Gallup late in life, and he was the minister at the Westminster Presbyterian Church here in Gallup. And I wasn't a parishioner at the church, but I quickly became Don and I quickly became good friends, in spite of a large age difference between us. But Don was, in my opinion, just a remarkable human being. It seemed to me that he, if he wanted to, he could have lived anywhere on the face of the earth he chose to live. He just was extremely intelligent and resourceful and experienced, and had a way about him with other people that was gracious, among other things. But as we were having lunch, a thought came into my mind, and I asked Don, what are you doing here? Why are you in Gallup? And he had a quick answer for me, and the answer surprised me. I wasn't expecting it, but his answer was, he said, "Bob, I'm Irish, and I come from the Celtic tradition, and we believe and have a belief that there are places on earth that are places of thin veil." And as Don described it to me, he said that a place of thin veil in the Irish tradition is a place where the membrane or veil between the material world and the spiritual world is thinner. And in Don's words, he said that places of thin veil on earth are places of struggle, where people are drawn to places of thin veil, and they're drawn to engage in struggle between good and bad, between good and evil. And as he described it, kind of the other description he said was that in places of thin veil, from the material world, it goes both ways. That it's easier to access the spiritual world from the material world, and vice versa. So that was intriguing to me, and it was not a concept that I was familiar with or that I knew of, but it felt right to me, and it felt, in my experience, and in the experiences of many other people I've talked to in Gallup, it just seemed to, regardless of what I thought, it felt to me as if there was something to it. So at that time, I had been for some time gathering materials to do a book about Gallup, and to do a book about my life's experiences in Gallup, in terms of how I have become familiar with Gallup's history and the people and the conflicts of Gallup. At that time, about 15 years ago, that was late in my term as mayor of Gallup, from 2003 to 2007, and that was, I think, fair to say that in some respects it was a very successful term as mayor, and in other respects it was a very unsuccessful term as mayor. There were both successes and failures. And I had come to believe that, or I'd come to realize that, or had the sense, I should say, that some of the failures during my term as mayor were due to the fact that I didn't fully understand Gallup's history. And I didn't understand some of the dynamics in the community that would have been helpful for me to understand, which I just didn't understand at the time. So I had become interested in Gallup's history and really was kind of enthusiastic about exploring that. So in my book, titled A Place of Thin Veil, Life and Death in Gallup, New Mexico, I do just what I've described. I tried to tell some of Gallup's stories based on the research I've done, the personal experiences I've had with some of the people involved, or the friends or relatives of some of the people who have passed away involved in those stories. And there's a lot of those stories. I think two of the most iconic and moving stories, two of the stories, if I had to categorize two of them that grabbed me in ways that they just wouldn't let me go, are the story of Larry Casus's kidnapping of Mayor Emmett Garcia in 1973. And I actually get goosebumps as I say those words. It's a story that I've really sought out, and it's a story that I feel at times has sought me out. Larry Casus and I are almost the same age. We were both sophomores at UNM in 1973 at the time Larry kidnapped Mayor Garcia, or abducted him from City Hall at gunpoint, although I did not know him. And I was in my own universe at that time and did not know of the controversy and wasn't following it prior to the abduction. The other story is the story of the 1935 Coal Riot, sometimes characterized as the story of the Gallup 14, which was the kind of penultimate coal strike in Gallup after a series of mini coal strikes over many years in Gallup from the 1889 or 1890, leading up to the kind of the concluding coal strike in 1935. And that, of course, is the event in which a McKinley County sheriff and two deputies were leading two prisoners from a magistrate court in an alley between Aztec and Coal, behind what used to be the magistrate court building, a little bit west of where the American Bar is now, into an alley, and in which a group of approximately 100 coal miners and family and friends of coal miners surged into the alley seeking to try to free the coal miners. A gunfire erupted. The sheriff, Mac Carmichael, died of gunshot wounds in that encounter. Two of the deputies were wounded. Two of the coal miners, or the coal mining sympathizers of the coal miners, also died. And there was a trial, a very notorious trial, perhaps the trial of the century in New Mexico. The defense attorney was a former Supreme Court justice of New Mexico. The prosecuting attorneys became some of the most prominent attorneys in the state of New Mexico, in Albuquerque, after the trial. And it's a story that left some unanswered questions. The trial left unanswered questions. So I've been asked to rather than just to talk just about stories, to talk about the visual presentation of stories, and that's something that is necessary and became necessary, and eventually I really enjoyed pouring myself into. But it's not brought me into the stories. It's something that I developed as I recognized the necessity to present visuals to accompany the written word. And so it's not an easy process. It requires a lot of work to gather visual images, from archives like the Palace of the Governors, from newspapers like the Albuquerque Journal or the Santa Fe New Mexican, from friends and family members, and notably the Gallup Independent, of course, has a extensive history and collection of photos of Gallup's history and people who have been involved and shaped Gallup's history over the years. And some things are as simple as high school yearbooks, and that's one of in trying to present the story of Larry Casus and Emmett Garcia visually. I received photos from family members. In particular, I received, some young photos of the early Casus family at the time that they were growing up. This was Larry Casus's mother, who was Austrian, and Larry here, and three of his 5 siblings. And Larry's mother, Larry is half Austrian and half Navajo. His father was Navajo, and this picture conveys many things to me. One, visually, it shows the mixed race of his parents, and just kind of an idyllic situation that for some young children, with their mother caring for them, dressing them well, and growing up happily, as you would expect for a young family to do. Nothing extraordinary there, except it's just what appears to be an idyllic youth. Found from and these photos were supplied to me by Larry's sister, Ursula, and this is Larry's father and mother, I believe, on their wedding day. I think they're necessary to humanize these kind of photos are necessary to kind of humanize the participants, to give the reader a feel for who these people on the written page are. But ultimately, this led to a difficult period, extremely difficult, and that was when Larry began protesting the appointment of Gallup Mayor Emmett Garcia in 1973 to the UNM Board of Regents. And Larry was protesting Emmett's appointment to the Regents based on the fact that Emmett was a 1/3 owner in the Navajo Navajo Inn, which was a store or bar, or a bar combination with a store, just outside of Window Rock, which had a reputation for serving alcohol to Navajo people to the point of intoxication that the parking lot was reputed to be littered with unconscious people who had purchased alcohol at the Navajo Inn. Sometimes, the words have always struck me, passed out face down on ant piles. So when Larry, who at that time was a sophomore at UNM and president of the Kiva Club in Albuquerque, at UNM in Albuquerque, again, the same time I was there as a student, but more involved in studies and basketball than activism. He and the Kiva Club began actively protesting Mayor Garcia's appointment to the Board of Regents. And this is a photo I found of the regents. The head regent is Calvin Horn. And there are there are 4 other regents. The 2 in the middle I don't know. The regent here is from Gallup, Walter Wolf, and the regent here is a man named Austin Roberts, who was the law partner of my father, who was an attorney in Farmington. It's probably hard to pick up from this distance in this photo, but there's something striking in this photo to me, and that is the trepidation of Walter Wolf and Austin Roberts as they're in this meeting. Their posture and their eye movement signifies to me that they are anxious and that they are gripped, maybe too strong a word, but that there's something going on there that is trepidatious to them. And what that ultimately became, and before we go to that, it's important to humanize Emmett Garcia as well. This is Mayor Garcia on the night he was elected mayor of Gallup in 1971, lifted onto the shoulders by his political supporters. And by all accounts, Mayor Garcia was a good mayor. He was an activist mayor, hardworking mayor, got into the office early, worked late, pushed his staff hard, and was really progressive and pushing new projects, new ideas, and new programs in Gallup. The abduction of Mayor Garcia by Larry Cassous took place not long before the municipal election in 1973. It took place just a couple of weeks before the election was to take place. And it was, simply put, it's just something that's hard to imagine happening. It was, and it was something that you would expect to see in a TV show in terms of the level of violence, but perhaps even more so. And to give you some depictions of that, this is a photo of the mayor's desk in which a pistol, Larry Cassus's pistol, discharged, hitting the desk of Mayor Garcia during a struggle. What happened is that City Hall then is where it is now, and Larry Cassus and another young Navajo activist, Robert Nakai-Dene, went into City Hall with Larry carrying a gun, Nakai-Dene carrying what was described as a bomb, but it was probably something homemade that may or may not have had the capacity to go off. Probably some more for display than for a true threat. But there was a standoff. The then police chief barreled into the office with Mayor Garcia and Larry Garcia, attempting to stop the abduction. And at Mayor Garcia's demand, Manuel Garcia turned over his weapon to Larry Cassus. And Larry Cassus and Robert Nakai-Dene then marched Mayor Garcia down 2nd Street to Highway 66, turned right and went to Stern Sporting Goods. And by sporting goods, that was a not selling basketballs and footballs. It was guns, arms, rifles, ammunition. The owner, Ivan Stearns, was out to lunch or taking a coffee break, and they used Chief Gonzalez's pistol to break the door and go into the store to hold Mayor Garcia captive there, while all the law enforcement officers in the area responded and swarmed to the scene, creating a standoff. The standoff was broken when Larry Cassous heard a noise back in the alley, and at that time he had Mayor Garcia under gunpoint. And actually, I'm going to kind of cut to the chase. I'm not going to. The story's going on a little bit too long and with too much detail. But the visual images of the scene are striking, and these are. This is a shotgun inside Stern's Sporting Goods. After Mayor Garcia escaped, I won't tell you how he escaped. This is the city attorney in the alley behind Stern's Sporting Goods as the encounter is taking place. These are, at one point, the police department just opened fire, and this was a car in front of Stern's Sporting Goods, and just showing the different rounds of ammunition that hit the car in front of Stern's Sporting Goods. This is inside Stern's Sporting Goods, looking out at the window at the bullet holes in the front where the round shot into the store. There's an iconic photo after Larry Cassous is shot to death, and his corpse is dragged out onto the sidewalk by police. And we're not going to take a look at those today. Following the death of Larry Cassous and the escape of Mayor Garcia, there were mass protests by Indian people in Gallup protesting Larry Cassus's death. And so I think that that's actually a story in which some of the photographs are very powerful. They can convey a real emotional message that supplements the story beyond what the words on a page can convey. And frankly, there are a lot of stories like that in Gallup, although this one, the story of Larry Cassous and Nimit Garcia, is certainly one that stands out. There's actually a couple of other photos I'd like to show you. One is this is a photo of Mayor Garcia and Chief Gonzalez late in life, back in approximately 35 years after the abduction. And I interviewed Mayor Garcia earlier in the day before he had this conversation with Chief Gonzalez at UNM Gallup, in which they gave a talk and some statements to UNM political science students and to the public at large. But it was, I think the photo reflects again just how this story affected their lives, and even 35 years later, it was real to them, and very real, and much of it had not diminished. The other thing that's a little bit out of sequence is, in terms of storytelling, is just gathering some photos of Larry Cassous as a high school student at Gallup High, in the Indian Club, as a football player, in the Indian Club again, and then his portrait from the Gallup High School annual in 1971. And we've gone on quite a while here, and I think I'd like to say two things. The visuals of associated with the Coal Riot of 1935 are just as striking. They're just as emotionally powerful. I don't think we have time to get into those, but they can convey much the same story, just the power of the emotions and the struggle of the story, between different segments of our community. The other thing that I would say that is not so much visual is that with both of those stories, there were parts of the stories that took decades to surface. And it's something that I've learned in studying history is the first recitation of it, the first events of it are not usually the whole story. There's usually more to come out, and that certainly has been the case with almost all of the Gallup stories. And I'm not by any means saying that's unique to Gallup, but it is something that I think is universal. That there's always seems to be more to say. There's more layers to uncover. So anyway, I hope that gives you insight into kind of the process of collecting photos and how photos I think are essential to supplement the written page. I guess I would conclude by saying this is that, and I get goosebumps when I say this as well too, Gallup is just, has been, I would not have traded my life for any other life. To the life I've lived here and experienced in Gallup, the ability to learn more about our history is just something that I cherish, and it's been an incredibly rewarding life experience to live my adult life in this town. We're in the final stages of, we're in the design work where we're actually, this week, I'm working with the editor on placement of the photographs into the text. And then there isn't a cover yet. The designer needs to come up with some cover designs, and I anticipate that it'll be out in a couple of months. It took me an outrageously long period of time, which is, I came up with the title idea 15 years ago, and I'd kind of been gathering materials and pondering this for 2 or 3 years prior to that. But it ebbed, it waned and ebbed and flowed, and in part because I didn't know how to tell the story. I didn't know whether it was going to be my memoir or whether it was going to be a Gallup history. And it took me many, many years to find an editor, kind of through a purely serendipitous encounter, an editor who helped show me how to, through my personal experiences, introduce the larger story. Yes, I mean, I enjoy writing books, and I'm glad you asked me that question, because what was on the tip of my tongue earlier. Writing books is incredibly laborious, incredibly difficult at times. It's really rewarding, and what is far and away the most rewarding aspect of this to me is I get to meet people and ask questions and learn about stories, and then writing a book gives me the vehicle by which I do that, and get to meet people and develop, in some cases, close friendships that I just never never would otherwise have, but for the book. So, yeah, I've got a lot of things I've got more, I've got plenty on my plate, and I doubt that I will get it all finished, but I'm going to enjoy trying.
Thank you to our special guest, Bob Rosebrough, for sharing A Place of Thin Veil, Life and Death in Gallup, New Mexico. The Octavia Flynn Public Library here in Gallup invites you to join us for live and recorded presentations daily during the month of May. You can find the schedule of events on our website at ofpl.online. Please make sure to follow us on Facebook, like and subscribe to OFPL's YouTube channel to stay up to date on all of the library events and programming. On behalf of the Octavia Flynn Public Library, thank you for watching.